Well, the events in Rafah are unfolding as ceasefire negotiations brokered by Qatar and Egypt are being held in Cairo. Israel's prime minister says the proposal Hamas has agreed to falls short of Israel's demands.
Israel will not allow Hamas to return to rule in Gaza. We will not allow them to rebuild their military capabilities and continue their project of destroying us. Israel will not approve any proposal that constitutes a threat to Israel's security and future. For that reason, I have ordered our delegation that went to Cairo to continue to insist on our demand to guarantee our security. In parallel, we will continue our war against Hamas. Our entry into Rafah is a very important step. Our army is on its way to destroy the remainder of their capabilities.
Well, Hamas says that if Israel's military aggression continues in Rafah, there will be no ceasefire deal. The senior spokesperson for Hamas, Osama Hamdan, says it's now up to Israel whether or not a deal goes through.
We would like to stress the fact that the ball now is in Netanyahu's court, and their behavior and attitude after we announced our agreement reflects determination by this criminal to foil all attempts of mediation, including those of the United States, and expresses his carelessness for the lives of the captives who are threatened every day through the bombardments of the Israeli military.
We'll bring in our correspondent, Mohammed Jamjoom, who's joining us now from the Jordanian capital, Amman. And Mohammed, let me first ask you about reporting that seems to suggest that the U.S. has paused a weapons shipment to Israel. What more can you tell us about this and the details of it?
So, Doreen, we haven't gotten any official response from the Israeli government to these reports. What we are seeing are statements by some officials, anonymously sourced officials in Israeli media, and the suggestions are that folks in Israel are concerned, members of the security establishment especially, that the halting of this weapon shipment is a tactic by the U.S. to increase pressure on the U.S. government to stop an all-out invasion of Rafah, and also to try to move the Israeli government into accepting the terms of a ceasefire. Now, there aren't a lot of details being reported about what was in that weapons shipment. We are seeing numbers like perhaps around 1,800 2,000-pound bombs and around 1,700 500-pound bombs. Those would have been included, we're told, in that shipment that was halted. At least the reports are suggesting that. Now, of course, we should stress that this is a very small amount of weapons compared to the number of weapons that the U.S. provides to Israel. This is really just a drop in the ocean when you look at the type of weaponry that the U.S. continues to provide to Israel. But it does seem, even though nothing official from top Israeli officials, it does seem that there is concern among the security and military establishment, based on some of the quotes we're seeing in Israeli media reports, that this perhaps is a harbinger of things to come, meaning that if Israel doesn't start adhering more to what the U.S. wants, perhaps the U.S. will halt further shipments of weapons going forward.
And okay, Mohammed, when it comes to what's happening right now, and we know that the ceasefire negotiations are still taking place in Cairo, how much pressure is there internally on Netanyahu? Because we've seen the demonstrations in Tel Aviv not only take place, but they seem to be growing as well.
Yeah, that's right. And you know, the last 2 days there have been demonstrations in various cities in Israel, mostly held by relatives of the Israeli captives still being held in Gaza. When it was announced that Hamas was accepting the ceasefire proposal that had been presented to them, you had, we're told, hundreds of demonstrators go out on the streets in Tel Aviv that evening, and they were saying that they were going to stay out all night. They were going to continue to come out to put pressure on the government to enter into a ceasefire agreement so that they could get their loved ones back. Yesterday, there were reports that there were demos also in Tel Aviv This morning, even, there are reports and there are videos popping up online on social media channels showing a smaller group, perhaps dozens of relatives of captives being held in Gaza, but out there blocking one of the main streets, Ayalon Street in northern Tel Aviv, trying to send a message to the government that they are going to continue to mobilize. Now, Dareen, we are now reporting out of Amman, Jordan, because we're no longer allowed to report in Israel. Our office space was shut down. But I can tell you, I was in Tel Aviv this past Saturday at one of the weekly demos that happens on Saturday in Tel Aviv. There were thousands of anti-government demonstrators, relatives of captives. They were saying the time is now for Israel to go ahead and enter into a deal. They were chanting, there is a document in front of you, sign on the dotted line. They want to see this come to an end. They say there is no more paramount importance as far as any issue in Israel right now, as far as getting back those captives. So there is mounting pressure on Netanyahu. He has not ceded to any of that pressure as of yet, but it's going to be interesting to see at such a crucial hour, such a critical time when negotiations are ongoing, if more people will be going out into the streets and mobilizing, and how much more pressure, political pressure, that will put on the Prime Minister.
Okay, Mohammed, thank you so much for that reporting from Amman. And once again, just to remind our viewers, Mohammed Jamjoom is reporting for us from Amman because Benjamin Netanyahu's cabinet has banned Al Jazeera. So that's why we're having to report from outside of Israel. And that is a live shot from Gaza right now this morning. Let's continue the conversation about the weapons shipment, the pause, I should say, in a shipment of weapons to Israel by the U.S. and speak to Amir Oren, who's a military and government commentator with Haaretz newspaper, joining us from Tel Aviv. Mr. Oren, thanks for your time. So how is this being viewed in Israel?
Well, it's viewed as a very significant move. And in order to understand the background, it's both legal and political. Later today, May 8th, Secretary of State Blinken and Secretary of Defense Austin must certify that all arms shipments to Israel, as well as to other countries, are given or sold when these countries uphold the international law and do not violate human rights and do not impede humanitarian aid. Now, as the time for this document to be signed was getting close, Netanyahu kept talking about the Rafah operation in direct opposition to President Biden. So after all the public statements and the phone calls between Biden and Netanyahu did not help, the administration took a two-step move. First of all, it secretly halted or paused this particular shipment because it was the next in line. It didn't have any particular significance per se, but the shipment was next in line, and this was a signal intended only for the Israeli cabinet to understand.
Right.
When that did not help.
Yeah, okay, so when it comes to this signal, what is the U.S. signaling to Israel? Or is the U.S. trying to pressure them not to continue with this Rafah offensive? Or is the U.S. trying to pressure Israel into these ceasefire negotiations and eventually a deal? What's going on here?
In a general sense, and it's very ironic because usually when we speak about deterrence, we speak about the political will of governments to execute what they say, to make good on their threats. And here, the threat was not against an adversary, but against a partner or ally. And when the Netanyahu government decided to challenge the Biden administration and ignore its warnings, then Biden had to show Netanyahu that he is serious. Now, yes, it has to do with the Rafah operation because Biden demanded that Netanyahu not undertake any major military operation that is a ground maneuver. Of course, surgical raids in order to release the hostages or perhaps even to kill or capture the Hamas leadership are fine as far as Washington is concerned, but not a massive movement from the ground, but also with air support, which will drive the 1.4 million civilians anywhere, up
But
north
Mr.
or
Oren,
into
I mean,
Egypt.
besides this being a symbolic move, as many are describing it, what difference does it actually make to Israel practically on the ground? Because even U.S. officials are saying that the Israeli military has enough weapons supplied by the U.S. and other partners to conduct the Rafah operation if it chooses not to listen to the U.S.'s objections.
You know, no battle is the very last one, and no war can end without the government and military being prepared for the next one. And even though one particular action can be executed with whatever you have in stock, you must replenish your stock in order to prepare for Lebanon, for instance, or for another Iranian contingency. So it doesn't have to do only with what is happening tomorrow. You must think about next week and next year.
Okay, thank you so much for speaking to us from Tel Aviv. Amir Oren, thank you.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.